I never imagined that the most peaceful night of my life would also be the night I would die. I wasn't on the Mount of Olives, I wasn't walking through Jerusalem, I was in my own home, sitting in my armchair, reviewing notes for the next day's service. A sharp pain in my chest, then another. Then a pain that shot through me like lightning. I remember trying to call my wife. And then nothing. I fell to the floor before I could utter a word. They say my heart stopped for 7 minutes before the paramedics managed to revive me. But what I experienced in those 7 minutes doesn't belong to this world. It doesn't belong anywhere I could describe with human categories. I saw my body from above. Motionless, pale, as fragile as I had never imagined. I saw my wife scream my name. I saw my own lifeless lips, and suddenly the room was filled with a light that didn't come from any lamp, any window, any physical corner. It was a living light. A light that knew who I was, a light that called me by name. I was absorbed into a space that had no walls or ceiling, but it was also more real than my own house. And there, in the midst of that indescribable clarity, I saw him, the one I had denied my entire life, the one I taught others to reject, the one I never expected to find on the other side of death. Jesus stood before me, not with anger, not with reproach, but with such profound urgency that my spirit trembled. And in just a few sentences that still resonate within me like a soft but unyielding thunder, he revealed something I had never understood. Humanity is entering the final trap before the rapture, and most don't see it. What he told me in those 7 minutes forever transformed my life, and perhaps it can transform yours. Before we continue, tell me in the comments, do you think many people today are spiritually asleep without realizing it? Your answer could be the first step to understanding what comes next. And it was then that Jesus raised his hand and the sky was torn open before my eyes, revealing a truth I never thought humanity could bear. In that instant, I understood that what I was about to see was not a vision, but the silent judgment that had already begun. My name is Ephraim Ben-Jalvi, I am 54 years old, and I was born in Tel Aviv. I am Martha's husband and Sarah's father, my greatest treasure in this world. That evening, as I reviewed my notes for the next day's service, I never would have imagined that I was minutes away from crossing the threshold between life and death. The living room lamp cast a warm light on my books, and the house breathed that familiar calm that one believes is eternal. Nothing warned me that each second was silently drawing me closer to a destiny that would transform everything I thought I understood. The first twinge in my chest was mild, so subtle that I mistook it for accumulated fatigue. The second, however, felt like an icy finger pressing directly on my heart, pushing it toward an invisible abyss. I tried to breathe deeply, to convince myself it was just tension, but something inside me knew it wasn't. It was a different sensation, a silent alarm that awakened a fear I didn't want to acknowledge. I got up to call Martha, who was tidying up Sarah's room, but I had barely taken 2 steps when the pain pierced me like a spear. My knees buckled without resistance, and the floor seemed to close in with brutal force. I tried to utter her name, to ask for help, to break the silence that was beginning to envelop me. But my voice cracked before it could form. Reality folded around me as if the world had lost its balance. And I understood, terrified, that something serious was happening inside me. I fell sideways, feeling every object around me become blurry, as if I were being absorbed by a veil that distorted everything. My breathing fragmented into weak gasps, increasingly distant from real sound. I tried to move my arms, to cling to the chair, to hold on to the life that was slipping away, but my muscles no longer responded. It was as if I had ceased to belong to my own body. The pain reached an unbearable point and then suddenly disappeared. Everything went dark with a thud, as if a door had been slammed shut from the outside. There was no more weight, no temperature, no heartbeat, only a silence so absolute it seemed to swallow my existence. It was a stillness alien to the world of the living, a total absence of movement and time that enveloped me completely. And within that motionless abyss, I understood without a doubt. My heart had stopped beating. Marta came running, leaning over me, hitting my face in desperation, calling for me as if her voice could pull me from an invisible precipice. I saw her crying. I saw her fear, but everything seemed filtered through a thick pane of glass that grew between us. I wanted to go back, I wanted to touch her hand, I wanted to promise her that I wouldn't leave her alone, but an ever-increasing distance separated me from her. A silent border I couldn't cross. It was then, on that trembling edge where life dissolves without warning, that an unexpected radiance began to expand behind me, a light that didn't come from this world and that seemed to open a path to something far beyond my death. I felt a gentle, almost delicate detachment, as if an imperceptible breeze were peeling me away from my own skin. It wasn't a painful tug, but a silent release, a separation so clear that I was surprised not to feel panic. Suddenly, the room lost its depth, as if reality had become light. And there I was, raised a few centimeters above my own body. Seeing myself lying on the floor, motionless, with a pale face and half-open eyes, was a vision that defied all logic, but didn't provoke the horror I imagined it would. Death held a strange mystery. I could see Marta kneeling beside me, her hair disheveled and her hands trembling as she tried to pull me back. Her voice broke in pleas that pierced me, but which I couldn't answer. I tried to touch his shoulder, to shout that I was still there, that he shouldn't stop fighting, but my hands moved without making any contact. It was like trying to reach for a memory. I saw him, I felt him, but I couldn't touch him. A profound helplessness washed over me, more painful than the heart attack that shut down my body. The sound of the buzzer echoed like a sharp blow, and two paramedics burst into the room with speed and precision. I saw them assess my condition, prepare the equipment, their hands perform maneuvers I had only ever seen in movies. I observed everything with absolute clarity. I could even feel the tension in their breathing, but the most striking thing was the calm that enveloped me, a serenity that contrasted sharply with the urgency of the scene. I wasn't afraid, there was no confusion, only a peace that didn't belong to this earth. My senses expanded in ways beyond belief. I could see the texture of the carpet, the tiny cracks in the ceiling, the vibration in Marta's voice when she repeated my name. I could even perceive her thoughts, not as exact words, but as waves of anguish that resonated within me. And yet, in that mixture of pain and separation, an invisible presence seemed to hold me as if I weren't alone in that state suspended between two worlds. Suddenly, I noticed it. Behind me, a light began to emerge. First faint, like a timid glow struggling against the shadows, and then more intense, more alive, more conscious. It wasn't a physical light or a reflected gleam. It was a luminous presence that seemed to be watching me, waiting for me, inviting me. The house, the paramedics, Marta, everything began to fade beneath that clarity, which advanced unhurriedly, but with absolute authority. I will go to confront it. And in that movement, I understood that I was no longer breathing, but I didn't need to. The light expanded like a boundless embrace, passing through walls, filling every corner with an indescribable purity. My body ceased to be a point of reference. The earthly world lost its weight, sound, and form. A gentle, irresistible force began to draw me toward it, enveloping me in a peace so profound that no human words could encompass it. And just as my essence began to fully surrender what remained of my earthly life, that light began to take shape. A silhouette that awakened in my spirit an ancestral recognition, a profound tremor that announced that what was about to be revealed would change my destiny forever. As the figure emerged from the radiance, I felt the universe hold its breath, as if something sacred were about to be spoken. The figure within that light did not reveal itself suddenly. It emerged slowly, as if the radiance itself were yielding space to a presence too great to erupt abruptly. I remained suspended, weightless, feeling my spirit vibrate with a mixture of awe and reverence. Each passing second made the light grow more intense, yet surprisingly, it didn't hurt my eyes. It was as if I had been made to see it. Although I still couldn't make out its face, my soul already knew that what stood before me did not belong to this world. The clarity that surrounded it pulsed like a living heart. And to the rhythm of that light, I felt something within me begin to melt. My doubts, my ancient certainties, my rabbinical structures, everything seemed to silently crumble. The figure took a step forward, and with that simple gesture, the space changed. There were no walls, no floor, no ceiling, but there was a sense of place, of absolute presence. It was like being inside a sanctuary built not by human hands, but by the very vibration of eternity. And yet, I felt no fear, only recognition. Suddenly, the silhouette took on more defined contours, and my spirit trembled as I understood what my eyes still hesitated to accept. It wasn't an angel, not an ancestor, not an unknown celestial being. It was someone whom, despite having denied him all my life, I knew in the deepest part of my being. His garment was white, but not an earthly white. It was like a new color, a hue that seemed to contain life in motion. His hands were outstretched, not in judgment, but in welcome. When his face began to become visible, I felt something inside me break with an unbearable sweetness. His eyes were like gentle fire, like still water, like absolute truth made manifest. They reflected no condemnation, they carried no reproach, they bore no shadow. What emanated from him was love, a love so pure that it penetrated every corner of my consciousness. It was then that I heard a voice, not with my ears, but with my whole being. A voice that sounded like rivers, like wind, like the perfect note of an eternal instrument that had never been played before. Ephraim pronounced my name as if he had spoken it before I existed. And upon hearing it, all my defenses crumbled. My soul bowed without command, drawn by the majesty before me. That voice contained a tenderness that completely disarmed me, but also an authority so profound that I knew none of his words could be ignored. I, who had taught myself all my life to reject him, now stood before him, unable to hide anything. A tremor, a gentle touch coursed through my spirit. It wasn't fear, it was a powerful awareness that my entire existence was laid bare before the truth. He took another step toward me, and the universe seemed to adjust around him. The light responded to his presence as if it knew him, as if it obeyed him, as if he were its origin. I knew, without needing an explanation, that what he was about to reveal to me was not a message to reassure me, but a warning that carried the weight of eternity. And just as his gaze pierced mine, I felt that something immense was about to unfold before us, something that would shake every certainty I had defended for years. When Jesus took one more step toward me, the light that surrounded him seemed to expand as if responding to his proximity. It wasn't a brightness that illuminated, it was a presence that poured out, that filled every space, that breathed with him. And as we stood face to face, I felt a gentle current flow through my being, silently dismantling every barrier I had built over the years. It was strange to understand that I had no body and yet feel so clearly the impact of his nearness. A mixture of reverence, humility, and an impossible peace took hold of me. Then he spoke. It wasn't a physical sound, nor an echo, nor a whisper. It was a voice that made its way directly into my soul, as if each word had formed within my own thoughts, yet remained entirely his own. His tone was indescribable, deep as ancient waters, but so tender it almost hurt. It was a voice that didn't seek to persuade, it simply revealed. And once revealed, no lie could stand. My spirit trembled before the clarity of that living truth. Ephraim, I have searched for you every step of your life. That phrase struck at something I didn't know was broken. All my religious training, my studies, my rabbinical certainties, my arguments for denying his identity, everything felt small, fragile, useless in the face of the magnitude of those words. Jesus didn't speak to me as an enemy or as an unbeliever. He spoke to me as someone deeply known, known beyond the flesh, beyond history, beyond any belief I had held. As he spoke, soft shapes began to move around me, as if the light were responding to his message. They weren't visions yet, but hints of something preparing to reveal itself. Each glimmer seemed to hold a hidden meaning, a prelude to a greater truth that had not yet taken a defined form. It was as if eternity were breathing, waiting for the exact moment to open before my spiritual eyes. I felt suspended between awe and surrender. Jesus slowly raised his hand, and the atmosphere vibrated not with violence, but with a harmony that made the space seem alive. My spirit felt a profound stirring, as if being called to listen, not just attentively, but with absolute availability. His gaze, fixed on mine, held a perfect blend of mercy and urgency, a silent message that wordlessly said, "There is something you must see." I knew that what was coming was not to satisfy curiosity, but to awaken slumbering souls. He spoke again, and each word fell within me with a celestial weight. What you are about to witness is not a symbol or a dream, it is the true condition of the world and the human heart. And upon hearing that, I felt an inner jolt, not of fear, but of a deep awareness that my entire life had been an involuntary preparation for this moment. Something immense was approaching, something that would reveal what humanity has refused to look directly at. My spirit tensed, expectant, vulnerable, open. It was then that a gentle tremor pierced the light, as if the sky itself were preparing to show us its pain and its warning. And I, completely surrendered to what was about to be revealed, felt that an enormous truth was beginning to germinate in the air, like a seed about to break its shell. And in that silence before the revelation, I knew that the vision about to be born before me would not be just an image, but a calling that would split my soul in two. The light around Jesus began to transform as if obeying a silent command. It expanded in gentle waves that seemed to pierce not space, but spirit itself. Around me the radiance opened like a veil slowly tearing, revealing an unknown horizon. There were no definable colors, yet everything was vibrant. There were no concrete forms, yet every contour seemed I was alive. I remained motionless, not for lack of will, but because something sacred was taking shape before me, and my soul could do nothing but contemplate. Jesus extended his hand, and the clarity ordered itself, gathering at a point that began to expand like a vision, emerging from the depths of another dimension. Suddenly, I was no longer in my house or in the room bathed in celestial light. I was in a space that seemed outside of time, where the sacred and the eternal intertwined effortlessly. The scene that appeared before me was not a dream, nor a metaphor, nor a spiritual interpretation. It was a reality shown from the perspective of one who sees beyond human veils. At first, I saw multitudes walking, working, laughing, fulfilling daily routines, as if nothing in the world was out of place. People filled temples, synagogues, churches, raising their hands, reciting prayers, quoting scriptures with lips accustomed to it. Everything seemed right until Jesus spoke, and his words dropped a truth that pierced me like a sword. They look toward me, but they don't seek me. They mention me, but they don't hear me. Their lamps are lit, but without oil. The vision drew nearer, and my eyes opened to a deeper dimension. I no longer saw only bodies, I saw hearts. Hearts filled with routine, but empty of intimacy. Hearts that thought they were awake, but that slept in an ever-thinning spiritual fog. Hearts that confused habit with faith, tradition with communion, activity with life. And in that moment, I knew, without anyone explaining it to me, that this was the first warning. The world was immersed in a dream that no one recognized as such. Jesus looked at me, and his gaze was a perfect contrast between love and sadness. As if I carried the weight of a humanity that was slipping away while believing it was drawing near. His voice echoed within me again. Ephraim, the heart can recite my name and still be far from me. The greatest deception is not open rebellion, but the illusion of being ready. A wave of understanding swept through me, revealing how blind I had been even in my own religious devotion. The scene intensified, and I could see the crowds walking by, unaware that a shadow was stealthily approaching their lives. It wasn't an evil shadow in appearance, it was comfortable, soft, alluring. It was the shadow of distraction, of overconfidence, of spiritual self-deception. And that shadow slowly enveloped all those who lived a superficial faith, a faith without depth, without surrender, without awakening. I watched, unable to look away. In that instant, I felt a rupture within me, as if an old part of my understanding was being torn away to make way for something new. The vision not only showed me the state of the world, it showed me the reflection of my own heart before I died. The certainty of that revelation shook me to my core. And when the light of the vision began to rotate, announcing that something even deeper was about to be revealed, I knew that Jesus' words had only opened the first door to a devastating truth. The vision rotated gently, as if an invisible hand were adjusting its focus. And suddenly I found myself beholding scenes that encompassed entire cities. I saw homes illuminated by screens, temples teeming with activity, and streets bustling with movement. But everything seemed shrouded in a kind of spiritual fog that I could only describe as a stupor of the soul. People walked with the conviction of being awake. Yet their hearts beat at a drowsy rhythm, disconnected from the eternal. It was like observing a world that breathed, but did not fully live. Jesus remained by my side, silent, allowing me to see without interfering. His silence was not absence, it was teaching. Every detail seemed chosen with divine intention. I saw religious leaders delivering eloquent speeches, temples overflowing with programs, chants, rituals, arguments, but with a notable absence of authentic inner fire. There was movement, but no transformation. There was noise, but no depth. Everything was built on foundations that seemed solid from the outside, but were dry inside, without oil, without intimacy. The vision drew closer, revealing the interior of hearts. That shook me more than any physical scene. I saw hearts repeating prayers as a routine, raising hands without conviction, proclaiming faith without truly listening to the voice of the Spirit. Divided hearts, distracted, weighed down by worries that seemed harmless, but which, in the sum, ended up being a chain. It was the image of lukewarm devotion, a faith that settled for the bare minimum, believing that this minimum was enough. Jesus finally spoke, and each word descended like a certain revelation. The enemy doesn't need to destroy you to drive you away from me, he only needs to lull you to sleep. And as he spoke these words, the fog that enveloped the world became more evident to my eyes. It wasn't overt evil, it wasn't declared darkness, it was a gentle sleep, a spiritual numbness so subtle that few perceived it, a silent trap where the heart stops burning without realizing it. The light of my vision intensified, and I began to see how people moved through their lives without noticing that what was essential was fading away. I saw young people absorbed by constant distractions, adults trapped in relentless routines, and the elderly resigned to a merely traditional faith. They all believed they were fine. They all believed they had time. They all lived as if spiritual awakening were a luxury they could postpone until tomorrow. And it was then that I understood how dangerous that illusion was. Jesus looked at me with tenderness and gravity, like someone watching a child walk on the edge of an abyss without realizing it. Ephraim, the greatest danger is not the advancing darkness, but the eyes that refuse to see. That phrase pierced me more than any other. It was a diagnosis of the human soul, a reflection that showed the condition of millions, including my own, before I died. The heart can become accustomed to lukewarmness until it mistakes it for peace. As my vision expanded once more, I could see that something was approaching from the distance, a movement in the spiritual realm that seemed to close the space between heaven and earth. It was not a threat, but neither was it indifference. It was a warning, a call, a prelude. And in that instant, as the light began to vibrate with a new intensity, I understood that the warning was only just taking shape, as if an even greater truth were about to reveal itself to me. The vision shifted, as if a curtain had been suddenly pulled back, revealing something that until then had remained hidden from my spiritual eyes. I no longer saw only slumbering crowds, but the source of the drowsiness that enveloped them. It was a faint, seductive radiance that seemed harmless at first glance, almost beautiful, but which concealed a silent intention. This false light imitated the true one, mimicking its warmth, its serenity, even its sacred appearance, but it was utterly devoid of life. It was a hollow reflection, an illusion designed to soothe, not to awaken. As I gazed at that deceptive light, I understood that it wasn't about an open manifestation of darkness. It didn't come with shouts, shadows, or threats. It came with soft whispers, with words that seemed sensible, with a comfortable spirituality that demanded neither surrender nor transformation. It was a light that said, "You're fine as you are." As the inner flame of each person slowly dwindled, I saw entire congregations moving about under that glow, unaware that they were losing sensitivity to the divine voice. Jesus, remaining by my side, watched that scene with deep sadness, but not despair. His voice ignited within me, clear as a crystal river. The greatest deception of the last days will not present itself as darkness, but as a mutilated version of the light. I knew then that this false light was more dangerous than any shadow, because it easily infiltrated hearts seeking superficial comfort, souls that preferred ease to conviction, lives that desired the appearance of faith without the cost of truly following it. The vision drew near, and I could see how this deceptive light enveloped the minds of people who considered themselves strong in faith, leaders, teachers, sincere believers, all being caressed by a spirituality that did not confront, correct, or call to repentance. A spirituality that offered momentary peace without eternal depth. I observed confident faces, raised hands, singing voices, but all sustained by a flame that barely burned, ready to be extinguished by the slightest breeze. A shudder ran through me when I realized that this light did not work to destroy faith, but to lull it to sleep. I wasn't trying to turn people away from God, but to keep them still, content, lukewarm, convinced they needed nothing more. It was a sweet poison, a spiritual anesthetic that slowly paralyzed all discernment, and what was most unsettling was seeing how many accepted it with open arms, believing they had found peace when in reality they were losing their lives. Jesus raised his gaze to the false clarity, and his face reflected a perfect blend of compassion and justice. Many will follow these glimpses, thinking they come from me, but I do not dwell in what does not demand surrender. I felt the weight of that statement fall upon me like a soft but powerful blow. I understood that the true danger was not in the declared darkness, but in what imitated the truth without possessing its essence. At that moment, my heart, or what remained of it in that spiritual state, trembled before the magnitude of the deception spreading over humanity. The vision began to vibrate as if a greater force were about to burst onto the scene, revealing what this false light tried to conceal from the shadows of its empty radiance. And it was in that growing vibration, charged with a sense of celestial urgency, that I sensed something far deeper was about to unfold before my eyes. The scene began to expand as if space itself were folding outward, revealing a place unlike anything I had ever seen on Earth. It was an amphitheater made entirely of light, not solid light, but light with substance, which seemed to vibrate with a life of its own. Every line, every curve, every corner shone with a purity impossible to describe. There were no shadows, no imperfections, no defined boundaries. And yet, the place had form, it had purpose, it had a solemnity that made the soul bow instinctively. Jesus led me to one of the upper levels of the amphitheater, and as I stood there, the entire space began to fill as if a multitude were about to witness a cosmic event before us. A vast luminous surface unfolded like a living screen, though it wasn't a screen, it was more like an opening to another dimension, a portal that revealed reality from a perspective no human being could ever reach on their own. I felt my spirit. I adjusted, preparing to see without the filter of the flesh. Then the surface lit up, and scenes of the earth began to appear as if I were contemplating thousands of lives simultaneously. I saw homes, temples, streets, offices. I saw people hurrying, distracted, preoccupied with matters that seemed urgent from their perspective, but which, seen from that place, appeared minuscule. I saw religious leaders striving to maintain structures. I saw communities celebrating empty rituals, unaware that their spiritual lamps were slowly going out. Everything moved at a pace that conveyed activity, but not direction. Jesus watched with me, allowing me to absorb every detail before speaking. When his voice manifested within me, it was with a clarity that resonated throughout my being. "Look, Ephraim, Here you don't see scandalous sins or declared wars. Do you see anything worse? Do you see hearts that believe they are awake while they sleep? That statement shook me deeply because the vision showed exactly that, an active, religious, noisy world, but spiritually numb, marching towards something without realizing that its steps were unguided. The luminous surface drew closer, revealing faces in detail. I saw eyes that looked without seeing, hands that worked without eternal purpose, mouths that recited ancient words without living meaning. It was like watching people walking with lamps in their hands, but with the oil almost gone, without noticing the faint flicker of the flame. And then I understood that this amphitheater of light was not a place of spectacle, it was a place of revelation where the sky showed the true state of the human spirit without embellishment or excuses. A new wave of light swept through the amphitheater, and I felt as if the entire spiritual reality was adjusting to show me something even deeper. It was as if the sky were preparing the next movement in this revelation. One that would go beyond lukewarmness and reach a truth that many fear to face. And in that vibration that coursed through the space, I knew that what was about to manifest would not only reveal the deception, but its most dangerous root. The vision within the amphitheater of light began to deepen as if an invisible hand were turning a spiritual lens, focusing not on the surface of human life, but on its most hidden interior. Suddenly, I no longer saw only distracted faces or empty routines. I saw the interior of their hearts. It was like contemplating the very essence of each person, naked before the truth, without masks or speeches. Some souls shone with a soft, barely sustained glow. Others showed only intermittent flashes, like almost extinguished embers. And many, to my horror, were enveloped in a cold lethargy that they mistook for peace. Jesus remained silent, allowing me to observe without interruption. Their silence wasn't distance, but depth, an invitation to understand, not just to look. What I saw wasn't judgment, but a spiritual diagnosis. I saw hearts full of religious activity, but empty of real connection, and people who proclaimed faith with words, but whose inner fire had turned to ash. I saw leaders teaching eternal truths while their own lamps secretly burned out. Each scene revealed a painful reality. The distance between appearance and essence was greater than I had ever imagined. The vision paused for a moment on a group of believers who seemed fervent from the outside. They sang, declared, and moved with conviction, but upon seeing the depths of their souls, a bitter feeling washed over me. There was no fire there, only repetition. Only habit. It was as if they had learned to imitate life without truly possessing it. Their voices rose, but their hearts did not respond. It was a worship service without intimacy, a devotion without encounter, a lukewarm faith disguised as fervor. Jesus finally spoke, and each word struck me like a blow charged with tenderness and truth. Ephraim, many believe their faithfulness lies in what they do, but I look at who they are. The heart cannot deceive me. I felt that statement expand within me, revealing how deceptive spiritual self-sufficiency can be. I saw how many reassured themselves with outward works, convinced that their routine kept them safe. However, that security was an illusion, as fragile as a flame without oil. Then, the vision showed hearts trapped, not in open wickedness, but in constant worries. Work, goals, stability, reputation. These were not scandalous sins. They were ordinary distractions that piled up like stones until they crushed the space where the divine presence should burn. And I understood then that the enemy does not always disguises itself as darkness, but as seemingly innocent priorities, good things that, without vigilance, displace what is essential. As the vision progressed, a gentle but profound weight descended upon my spirit. It was not condemnation, but a calling, an invitation to look at my own life before dying, my habits, my omissions, my small concessions that slowly extinguished my spiritual sensitivity. At that moment, I discovered with pain that I, too, had lived more from form than from essence. The light in the amphitheater vibrated again as if the heavens with a vision seemed poised to show not only the deception in hearts, but the real danger of remaining asleep in it. And it was in that silent anticipation that I sensed an ancient parable, one I knew by heart, was about to unfold before me with a meaning I had never grasped. The light in the amphitheater began to shift as if a scene were emerging from the depths of time. Suddenly, I found myself observing an ancient and familiar landscape, a night road illuminated by dim lamps, and on it, 10 young women awaiting the arrival of the bridegroom. I knew this parable from my rabbinical studies. I had read it, analyzed it, and debated it countless times. But there, on that spiritual plane, I instantly understood that I had never seen its true meaning. What lay before me was not a symbolic story, it was a mirror revealing the condition of the church and the human heart. The virgins seemed calm, confident, certain that,